Hello everyone, and welcome to our reflection on the readings for this part of our study together. Really we're reflecting predominantly on the thought of Dr. Bruce Rumbold from La Trobe University in the School of Public Health, in particular in its relationship between his work and his experience as a teacher of pastoral care throughout his career. A fascinating bunch of readings. I know they've been challenging given that you've got 4 readings and substantial readings at that to squeeze into a 400-word reflection. However, I believe in you, and I can already see your skills of honing your efficiency as writers and analysts emerging in your reading reflections. So I'm really looking forward to what you have to write in response to these readings. I'm just going to spend quite a brief time today reflecting on these readings and try and reduce my perspective and encapsulate it in a very short, brief statement that may help you. I'm kind of glad though that this is happening late in the picture, because sometimes it can be too easy to rely on others, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your reflections on the basis of your experience and how you have been able to read and analyse and reflect on these readings from that experience without influence from me. But nevertheless, I like to have my say as well, so our conversation can come with some of my thoughts there on the table for you and us. So I want us to I want you to consider, if you don't mind, with me, sorry I have to keep adjusting this, that the core lens through which we read these readings is the question of what they mean for the art and practice of pastoral and spiritual care, in particular in the public sphere, in this case the sphere of public and community health. You can see, I hope, the implications of the spiritual nature of human beings for economics, social analysis and studies, and politics, political policy and so on, that the questions of what human beings are, what their lives mean, what drives them to behave in certain ways and so on and so forth, are deeply important for public policy and at the heart of what it means to talk about spirituality, faith, and indeed spiritual care. I'm sure you will have noticed as you read that Bruce Rumbold's vision of communities of faith that share a vital language of values and beliefs with the public health sector in pursuit of social justice and community ownership of living and dying well situates this discussion at the heart of our reflections on what it means to care spiritually. The crux of the issue here is that spiritual health is not only the business of religious traditions, and indeed spiritual health is making its way more and more into the language of public health, economics, public political policy and social policy as one of the determinants of good human healthy living and dying. The article by Leonard Syme, with delightful humour, I think, and self-deprecation, reaches for the elements of human life that will most effectively determine behaviour that promotes health. And he does it from the perspective of a medical practitioner, very self-satisfied in his own expertise, which is a very strong cultural perspective for many people working in all kinds of health. He reaches for the underlying determining factors behind human behaviour that have an impact on health. And as we discover with him, what he finds are that these elements are what we would call spiritual elements. And the primary case that he identifies is the case of hope, the capacity to build, as we have heard from Andrew Lester, a future story. Can I see my future as being meaningful? And if I can, how does that determine the way I live fully, and indeed perhaps the way I die? Syme recognises the complexity of the social and community dynamics of determining healthy behaviour. The insightful observation that complexity leads most of us to change the subject is a flag to the medical experts that it's no longer sufficient from any perspective to allow the complex nature of the human person in society to deflect our rigorous inquiry. It's too easy to stay in the land of I'm the expert, you listen to me, and my expertise will fix the situation. It's no longer apparent that that is the case. And in fact, the complexity of humanness and human community, indeed human spirituality, is at the heart of what it means to determine good, healthy living and dying. Given that it is a complex scenario and a complex situation to try and analyse, let's try and simplify our reflection for a moment. There are three elements as it appears to this discussion as it appears in these readings. There are more than that, but I'm being reductionist. I'm reducing it to three for our conversation. Firstly, the underlying behaviour that determines health is primarily spiritual, for example, hope, the capacity to construct a meaningful future story, as Lester put it. It's not only hope, though, is it? We also, in the readings here, talk of autonomy. We hear talk of the capacity to integrate our behaviours and our healthy living through community-based value building and meaning making, to integrate that with public policy. Secondly, all of this is a social justice issue, and the interview with Marmo, with Sir Marmo, was particularly pertinent on this. As long as the health of human communities is in the hands of the medical experts, and indeed deregulated economies, human communities will not be heard nor empowered in their shared building of spiritual health that underlies general health and well-being. And as Rumbold states, this healthy living includes healthy dying. And thirdly, the new directions in public health are on an intersecting course with the underlying values, beliefs and ideals of faith communities. If both public health and faith communities could recognise in each other their shared values and beliefs, their practices together could well be the basis on which communities in general are empowered to situate their healthy living and dying in the community rather than in the medical facility or organisation. It's clear to me how this relates very much to ageing for the sake of our discussion, but it is about ageing at every step of the human journey. As Marmo contends, if the current generation is educated in the underlying spiritual values that determine health, then the next generation will be born into this new approach. It can only take one generation to change the situation entirely. So that's, in a nutshell, how I see these readings playing out as the impetus for our discussion together when we next meet. Now, you will have noted that I'm using the language of spirit and spirituality, and that this language does not appear in the readings. Part of the task for us as spiritual care and pastoral care practitioners, and indeed as practical theologians, is to read into the language where we see spirit and faith implicitly present, even where it is not explicitly named. And that's why Syme's article is so compelling and dynamic, because as the article goes along, there is a reaching down beneath the surface issues to the underlying issues that he identifies as hope in his case, that we would then say, hope. We identify that as an issue of spirit and spirituality, and we can see how our own discipline of listening deeply into the co-construction of meaning through future story and the building of hope is relevant in this context. Hope, in Syme's article, becomes part of the preventative process of the way we deal with disease. Hope, he describes as part of our autonomy, control of destiny, the ability, he says, of people to deal with forces that affect their lives even when they decide not to deal with them. And I said he. I'm actually not sure whether Simon's a he or a she or a they, so take that on notice. What Syme is reaching for is the spiritual element in the lives of human beings. It is identified as control of destiny and empowerment, and we recognise those things as part of the what we call human spirituality. Attention to these social realities enables health and well-being to become a community-based phenomenon. And guess where we work? We work in the community. Some of us, of course, work in public health, but our work, even as we are part of public health organisations, permeates out into the community as it is often related to the capacity of the person to become well and whole and able to function as they go out and find the foundation of those things in their relationships through community. What's interesting about the Marmo article is that this study has revealed that, in fact, learning to live more with less is at the heart of tackling poor health behaviour at all levels of the social ladder. It's not so much, Marmo says, what you have, but what you can do with what you have. And you can instinctively hear, I hope, in that statement that, in fact, health is intrinsically related to who you are as a person, to your own capacity, to your own inner resilience, your possession of hope, of autonomy, your possession of meaning, so that your environmental circumstances are not as determining in the sense of your ability to be able to live fully and well. And so Marmo believes fully in investing in this layer, this what we would call the spiritual layer of humanness and human community, in order to change the whole framework of medical care, health and well-being. And Marmo believes this change can take place very, very quickly. He says, put emphasis not only on child survival, but on development, physical, cognitive, linguistic and social, emotional, and in a generation there will be healthier cohorts of adults. I hope you're feeling encouraged, because what this is saying to you and to me is that what we are doing as spiritual carers is in fact at the heart of social, economic and political transformation in the world. And Bruce Rumbold, in a beautiful way, in both of his articles, talks about the intersection between public health discourse, medical discourse in this way, and the reality, the communal, social reality of the faith community. In his case, he talks about the Christian church, because that's his context and his religion. Our faith communities are places in which these underlying spiritual determinants of human health and well-being are valued, believed in, championed, and co-created in community. Rumbold is an optimist for the faith community in a context where we so often hear derogatory comments about religious faith communities. Let me encourage you to think deeply about your role in your faith community, or your role in your other community context, or indeed your role in your public health context, and to wonder with these writers what it means, what it would mean for community-based organisations such as faith communities who hold similar values to those values of public health professionals who want to encourage the underlying spiritual elements in human life to flourish and therefore determine good health, good well-being in both living and dying throughout the human journey. What does that mean for you, and what does that mean for your community? And what does that mean for our conversation particularly in the context of ageing, which is something that spans our entire life. I look forward to our next gathering online, and I look forward to your reading reflections and to the discussion that they generate. See you soon.